If ever there was a narrative that needed the deconstructing, it would be Jordan Peele's Us, but beware.
Spoiler warning.
Again, this is not a normal review. I should have that as well on my channel, so go ahead and check that out. This is Deconstructing the Narrative. This is a brand new feature on my channel that you can help me decide on if I should keep doing by clicking the like button and commenting down below what you thought about it. You can also hit subscribe. But let's get cracking with Us. We start with the seed. What exactly caused the inequity, the imbalance, the disturbance in the force, so to speak, that acts as the protagonist's call to action, something to resolve, something to rectify? Well, that's the genius of Jordan Peele, right? Because he creates two very elaborate, concrete arguments that answers that question. You can either see it as the group of doppelgangers that show up at the family's house ready to attack them as a way that causes a disruption to the way things were before, because obviously this family was normal before that, right? Or you could do it my way, wait until the end of the movie when they start explaining everything. Now, I don't know if I'm right or anything, but I think the initial event was the government experiment that started everything. But how did I decide? How do you decide on which one's right, which one's wrong? Because no matter which one you pick, the protagonist and the antagonist switch places, so which one's right? That's difficult. This movie forces the viewer to actually think about what's going on. It doesn't give you the answers. One way that people often gain clarity is to look at the end of the movie, the outcome of the movie. Does it feel like a success or a failure? If it feels like a success, that means that whoever the protagonist is, they probably just won. If it feels like a failure, if it feels like a tragedy, they probably just lost. That's one way that tone is important when it comes down to the narrative structure. But the ending of Us feels elusive and bittersweet, like it's a tie. Another way you can find out who the protagonist is when you're watching a movie is look for the person who's driving the plot forward. Now we start to get a little bit of clarity because the only person who actually seems to be a leader out of any group is Red of the Tethers. She's the most interesting. She's the only one that speaks. And when you look at the actual family, they don't seem to have a leader. They're all basically just trying to survive in general, which means the protagonist is Red. Which brings me back to the seed. The seed is the government experiment that created the Tethers. Why is it a problem? Because it opened up a chasm of inequity and imbalance specifically for the tethered who feel imprisoned in the depths of the city. They are shadows of people. They are basically shackled to the people on the surface of the planet, and they are forced to do their will. They're sick of it. They want out. The way that it's dealt with, the way that it's focused on is actually super interesting. This gets 2 out of 2 possible stars. Next, we look at the protagonist. Who's going to be the one solving the crisis and how are they going to do it? The tethered are the protagonists and Red is their leader, so Red is the main protagonist who is leading the cause, who is leading the resolve. The idea is pretty simple. It's kind of symbolic. All she has to do is find the real family and sever that tie, sever that tethering in order to be set free. 2 out of 2 possible stars for protagonist. Next, we look at the main character of the movie, and this is a good example of when a protagonist and a main character are split apart. They are not the same person, because this time, the main character is focused on the real family, the normal family, and specifically speaking, the mom of the family. She's the one we see through the eyes of the most in the movie. However, this character doesn't really go through a lot of growth in the film because there is no influence character that is actually challenging them, unless you count Red, which I don't. It is possible that Red is the influence character, but it doesn't really pop like that for me when I'm watching. I might have to watch it a second time in order to actually see how that works. But for the most part, I didn't see a lot of growth in the character of the mom. However, the mom is the main character. That's something you can't really argue with. I'm going to at least give this 1 out of 2 possible stars. Next, the influence character. Like I said before, it doesn't exist. There is no character in this movie that offers a challenge to the main character on how to see the world the correct way. So this gets 0 out of 2 possible stars. Next, we look at the antagonist. This is somebody who is diametrically opposed to the goal of the protagonist. So if the goal of the protagonist is to kill the real copies of the people so the tethered could be set free, then the antagonist's goal is to stop them from doing that. The main family are the antagonists. Their entire role in this movie is basically written particularly to be against the tethered. They're both against each other, right? It's kind of a weird personified version of man versus self. At the end of the day, once you start analyzing the movie, once you start thinking about it stronger, you start to see where it has its strengths, where you have its weaknesses, and the antagonist is not a weakness, it's just a weird way to do things, just like the seed. But in general, the antagonists fit their role very well, 2 out of 2 possible stars. So again, we looked at the central issue that everybody has perspective to, and that is the government experiment that created the tethers. We looked at the protagonist, who are the tethered. We look at the antagonists, who are the family. You look at the main character, who is the main mom of the family, and you look at the influence character, who is apparently nobody, unless you count Red, which I don't, because I don't think it is that specific enough. Altogether, you get a rating of 7 out of 10 possible stars for the narrative structure. Jordan Peele is such an interesting director. The way that he directs his films, it's not always as concrete as other movies like it are, but it does make the audience think about it a little bit more, which is why I did this video in the first place. Guys, tell me what you thought of us in the comments down below, and for YouTube, you know you can subscribe to me, hit that like button, hit the bell to be notified when I come out with my next review or deconstructing video.